Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Mike Redford. Welcome to our third season of The Follow-Up. Coming up on tonight's show, it's the latest controversy aimed at taking down President Trump as the Democrats are calling for impeachment in the wake of his call to a foreign leader to investigate a political rival. Plus, the governor's threat to shut down state government over a budget impasse has been averted for now, but the battle for road funding continues. WSGW's Art Lewis is with us tonight to talk about those issues. And that's not all. Two major public health threats have people talking, including the dangers of flavored vaping products, which has led to a state ban, and the outbreak of EEE, the dangerous mosquito-borne virus. Joel Strasz from the Vape County Health Department is with us as well. Help us better understand what's at stake. But first, as always, we'd like to hear from you to help drive the conversation here on The Follow-Up. There are a variety of ways you can do that via social media on Facebook and Twitter. You can also dial into our hotline for The Follow-Up to give us your opinions in the night's conversation or suggest future show topics. And if you'd like to see any of our past shows, you can log on to deltabroadcasting.org. Art Lewis from WSGW is up first to lead our third season.
Another year already?
Third year in a row. You're going to try to help us make sense of the latest drama at the White House.
No. There's no sense to be made of any of it.
We'll see.
Not going to happen.
I'll judge you by the end of the night. At issue, of course, this phone call that President Trump made to the Ukrainian president, asking to look into a political rival, Joe Biden, which the Democrats say is sort of the beginning of grounds of an impeachment, so to speak. Okay, let's just pick this apart. Let me just start with this whistleblower, right? The whistleblower was not in the room when this phone call took place, right? Its second and third had knowledge. And it's interesting, a new intelligent rule indicates that that's just fine. You don't have to, you can go by hearsay.
Yeah, a new rule, you can go by hearsay, right.
If this is a court of law, if this is a criminal investigation, you throw it out. But second and third hand information, that's what you're hanging your hat on?
Well,
right?
It's politics, so you can do whatever you want. That's the nature of the beast. The whole thing from the beginning, from the time he got into office, the Democrats have looked at him as illegitimate. Hillary just said so the other day. They've been looking for a reason, and Mueller didn't give it to him. They couldn't find the obstruction, and he handed them this. I mean, so it's another avenue for them to travel down. They want to do this right up to Election Day. That's their theory, I think, and that's what's going to happen. And he's his own worst enemy sometimes because he can't keep his mouth shut, so he steps right in, but I think he loves it. Yeah. I really do. I think he really loves the controversy.
That's who he is. I read the transcript of the call, which he released, and
let's be careful of the title because it's not a transcript.
Okay.
It's a memorialization. There are a number of people with pads that write down what they hear, and then that's put into written form. A transcript would indicate that this is verbatim, this is what was said. Theirs is, it's not quite that way.
Okay, well, most of what I read that was, they think, close to it.
Close to what was said, yes.
He did ask the president to investigate Joe Biden and his son Hunter's business dealing
and he admitted
in Ukraine. He did, but there's nothing in there that I've seen, that I've read, and I've read many versions, that he, in exchange for holding up financial aid, unless you do this.
Well, the Republicans will tell you you're absolutely right. Schiff and the Democrats will tell you absolutely implied, and that he did.
Right.
It's just a political game.
Yeah.
You look at impeachments in the history of this country. Johnson, Clinton. We'll leave Nixon out because Nixon is probably the one that would have been impeached and convicted.
Sure.
But Johnson back in the 1800s, that was political. Clinton, in my view, was political. Yeah, maybe he was immoral, but it wasn't high crimes and misdemeanors against the country. And I said at the time, this is a political act and it shouldn't happen. And the exact same thing that happened there is going to happen now. If they impeach him, it's going to go to the Senate and it's going to die on the vine. Yeah. And that's what happened to Clinton. They impeached him, it went to the Senate, it died on the vine. It's a political game. I have this theory, I've probably expressed it before. The far right and the far left make all the noise. Mm-hmm. And we are inundated with it.
Sure.
In mainstream media, social media, it's all we hear is the far left, far right. I believe most Americans live in the middle.
Very true.
They may be fiscally conservative, they may have some liberal social values, or a mix thereof. But I think most Americans do not live on the far extremes.
Very true. Let's take a look at a poll that we can put up there on the screen in regards to the congressional Democrats starting impeachment inquiry into President Trump. So, as you can see, it's a CBS News YouGov poll, and 55% approve of at least an inquiry, which is what we've got now, and 45% disapprove. I mean, that's...
And actually, that's a lower number than when it first happened. It was as high as 62% in
Right.
some of the polls. So listen, the people that were polled gave their response. I think the American people are just tired of it.
Very much so.
They're tired of nothing happening in Washington. There are major issues on the table, and they've done nothing. One of the issues which has impact in Michigan is the USMCA, the Mexican-Canadian agreement with the United States that replaces NAFTA. Democrats favor it. She will not put it on the floor of the House. She's not going to give them a win. So nothing gets done.
Right, and that's what has people tiresome. And we didn't hire you to go to Washington
And do nothing.
for gridlock and do nothing.
Right.
Joe Biden, he shouldn't get a pass on this, right? He's an alleged front runner for the Democratic Party in the race for president. He's in the middle of this. I mean, back when he was a vice president, it's on videotape, we've seen it. He said he held up $1 billion in financial aid if the president of Ukraine, ironically, didn't fire the prosecutor that was investigating Hunter Biden's business dealings there. And he was a sitting president. He said, hey, if you don't believe what I'm saying, I got President Obama that'll buy into it too.
So if I have to give Trump a pass, I'm going to give him a pass. And I think what's happening is the Democrats are trying to get rid of him. So I think it's his own party that's after him in some ways. So, again, it's politics. It's the nature of the beast today. And it's unfortunate because I think the country suffers because of it.
Yeah. Well, let's change gears. Speaking of dysfunction, let's talk about...
and he looks right at me, folks.
Sorry, don't take that personally. Well, what's happening in Lansing? Speaking about politics, Governor Whitmer threatened to shut down the government over this budget impasse, which would have been today. She didn't do that, but what she did was she used her line item veto and took that pen and slashed 147 times. And
most in the history of the state.
Amazing. And she transferred about $600 million within certain state departments, which is her preview. This is just very ugly, right?
Well, and some of them I don't understand. Like she dumped $37.5 billion from pure Michigan.
Right.
But then she said, well, it can always be put back. That tells me that was a political move. She's got a piece of leverage she can hold out.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we do as politicians what's right for the state rather than what's right for my reelection or my party, And let's face it, it all revolves around the roads because she can't come to terms with the Republicans and they can't come to terms with her. They're not going to give her 45-cent gas tax. It's never going to happen, and she knows that. But they're not going to get what they want either. Put them in a room, lock the door, and say, don't come out until you got a solution.
Right.
And the other thing about the roads that worried me a little bit, even if she got her 45 cents, which would never happen, her original formula was she was going to give 84% to state and main trunk roads, 16% to locals. To me, that ought to be reversed because the main roads in this state have improved greatly. Travel any of the interstates, travel the main state roads. We were up north this summer. They were beautiful. But travel the local roads. Go into the communities. They need the money. I'd give them the 84%, put 16% into the trunk roads, and let them fix some of the local roads that are dire need. The road commissions don't have any money.
Sure. Yeah, she took out the $400 million or so. It was a one-time road funding.
Yeah, it wasn't enough, she said.
Okay, but it's a start. So you're absolutely right. This is her first budget. She just came in the office this year, and this is what she's getting. And I try not to compare it to the prior administration, but with Governor Snyder, we had budgets every year, right?
Well, that was, and I said on this show
Yeah.
last year that I think that was going to be his legacy. One of his legacies was the fact that he got the budgets done on time. Now, had a Republican legislature and a Republican governor, so it was maybe a little easier for him
That's
than her.
true.
No
Yeah.
two ways about it.
Yeah.
The other thing about it, she wants all this money for roads. Where's she going to get the people to build them? Contractors are up their eyebrows, and they can't find any more employees.
Right.
So what do? They bring in contractors from out of state to do
Right.
it. And the reality is she could have her $1 billion or $2 billion and she wouldn't be able to spend it.
Yeah. Well, like you said, I hope they get to the table, lock them in a room, because now we're getting to Thanksgiving and Christmas, and there'll be time off. If they don't get it done here in the next month, I don't anticipate you'll see much getting done. Maybe the first of the year.
No, I'm afraid that's true.
Right.
I'm afraid that's true. But, it's just politics.
Yeah.
And I go back to that word again. I hate to use
Sure.
that word. Listen, I talk about it for a living.
Yeah.
And I am so tired of talking about it. It's just unbelievable. I think people are tired of hearing about it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for agreeing to come on my show tonight and talking more about politics.
all right.
You do a wonderful job, and thanks for the opportunity and kicking off season 3.
I'll have to have you on my show. We'll talk about the media sometime.
That sounds good.
You were a member of it for a long time.
Yeah, we can talk about that. Well, up next, Joel Strasz from the Bay County Health Department is with us to talk about 2 major public health threats that have people very concerned. But first, we would like to hear from you to help drive the conversation here on The Follow-Up. Join our conversation by visiting our website at deltabroadcasting.org/thefollowup. Or hit me up on social media via Facebook or Twitter. And that's not all. Drop us an email at thefollowup@delta.edu. Or you can record a comment or question for next week's show on our follow-up hotline. That number is 1-877-430-8989. And remember, you can watch us right now on Facebook Live, too. So join the conversation at The Follow-Up. We really want to hear from you. Welcome back to The Follow-Up. A ban on flavored vaping products and the outbreak of this mosquito-borne virus called EEE has a lot of people talking. Joel Strasz is with us tonight. He is the Public Health Officer at the Bay County Health Department. Thanks for coming in tonight.
Thanks for having
Joel.
me here.
So let's go to some facts and figures first to set up the conversation that you and I are going to have on the vaping situation. And I'm looking at it right there. The flavored vaping products ban, it begins 10/2/19, which ironically is tomorrow, basically at midnight, right? The crux of this is they've been targeting these high schoolers, middle schoolers, the young people with the vaping, right? 900% increase in usage by middle and high schoolers nationally over the last couple of years, and more than 800 e-cigarette lung infections being investigated and 12 deaths. So I guess, how did it come to this? Where's the oversight? We've had some warnings for a while, and yet now it almost feels like we've been blindsided to the point we're taking this step of banning it. So maybe walk us through it as a public health.
So let's go back to where
Okay.
e-cigarettes and vaping started.
Sure.
It was presented as a healthy alternative to regular cigarette smoke.
Sure.
You're not going to get the transmission of tar and some of the carcinogens. That's how it was presented. But you still got the nicotine. And so that kind of overlaps with the introduction of legalized marijuana, whether it was medicinal or now we have recreational marijuana. And there's a lot of vaping, electronic transmission of that rather than pure smoking. So in this case, what we've started to see years ago, something called popcorn lung, severe respiratory illness that's associated with vaping, we started to get more and more reports of those. But particularly in this calendar year, we've seen a lot of reports on severe, very, very severe respiratory illness. And the one common denominator with all 800 cases is they were vaping in some form or fashion. A majority of these people, and I want to say kids because over 80% are under the age of 30. About 16 to 18% are under the age of 18 that have been identified with this illness. A majority of them use electronic products to vape marijuana. But also there's almost not necessarily an equal number, but a fair number that have also used it for the nicotine transmission as well. So while it's not one thing exclusively or the other, the common denominator is the use of vaping equipment and or vaping vapes or electronic cigarettes.
Sure. The Juuls or
the
whatever.
Juul, yeah.
Sure.
So the one thing that really is, it really appeals to younger people is the flavor. stuff. You know, if you remember smoking cigarettes, you know, I saw someone smoking, the rare instance I saw someone smoking a cigarette today in public, and actually got a whiff of the cigarette. And it's not a very pleasant smell, it's not a very pleasant taste, and it leaves a bad aftertaste.
Sure.
You don't get that with the e-cigarettes.
Well, the other thing I'll ask, I know you're not comfortable with the term vaping because it sort of
It implies water vapor.
It's just water vapor.
It's not.
And maybe it sort of started that way, but over time, you're basically breathing in poison, right?
So you're using that method is you're using heat to induce a nicotine product that produces aerosol, and you're both inhaling and exhaling aerosol and all sorts of other products or all sorts of other chemicals out.
Sure.
So it's not water vapor. It's not a harmless thing. That's the one thing that we really need to be clear about here. And I think that's, you know, whether it's nicotine or THC, there are chemical compounds that we just don't know about that we need to do more research and really have to get on top of. And the thing with it too is that in these particular cases, there is not one particular method or one particular brand that's been singled out. So the CDC and a number of state health departments and local health departments are looking into this and really, really diligently trying to find the source of this. And that's part of our work in public health is we really do a lot of detective work to square down as to what is the particular cause of these conditions.
The term, when we talked on the phone, was jailbreaking. Can you tell me what that is? What are they doing with the vaping or the e-cigarettes?
So
right?
in some cases, jailbreaking with a teenager, it'd be hard to go and buy, and you can do this too, but there are vaporization machines or vaporizers or e-cigarette transmissions specifically designed for marijuana. But then there are others where that they will use a Juul pod, and instead of using the refill for the Juul pod, put some sort of THC substance in there as well, and that's considered jailbreaking.
Okay, good. Well, you're up on the latest lingo, and I'm glad you're at. That's why I have you on the show. So Governor Whitmer, to her credit, has taken the lead on this, and we're going to be the first in the nation, the first in the nation, to ban these e-flavored, the flavors, right? The flavored vaping products. It begins at midnight tonight. There are some who feel like, okay, it's because of the youth, the kids that are taking it, so we've got to get it out of their hands. There are adults that say, you know what, why take it out of our hands? I mean, we're adults, we're more responsible, and sure, take it out of the youth's hands, but don't take it out of the adults' hands. Any thoughts on that?
Well, regardless, whether you're 16 years old, 30 years old, 40 years old, 60 years old, it's still the same transmission of chemicals into a body. And in particular, this particular method is more, is presented as a more youth alternative, or it's more presentable to youth.
Got it.
There's more demand for youth doing it than adults. So in that particular case, it is warranted.
Right, and it's the effect, the ban's in effect, again, beginning at midnight, at least for 180 days. This is sort of a temporary ban. It could be extended. So what's your guess on what will happen then? Do you think the industry at some point is going to get an alternative out there, or do you think this is something we're going to see for a long time?
Well, I think that the industry, the legitimate nicotine and tobacco industry, is going to have to come to terms with this somehow. Okay. Because there is no doubt that there are illnesses. There's not just a handful, but a substantial number of illnesses that have been reported. There's probably a substantial number of illnesses that have not been reported. And they're going to have to get behind it. And it's just a matter, before legal action happens with these things. And, how long did it take for the Surgeon General's report to come out after we knew for hundreds of years that smoking was bad?
Right.
So things happen a lot quicker in this day and age, and I suspect that the companies will come along fairly soon.
Probably so. Okay, we're going to change gears. We're going to talk about the outbreak of the EEE, the equine, or the Eastern Equine Encephalitis, or EEE. Worst outbreak in a decade. We have some facts and figures as well I want you to look at. This is in Michigan, 9 human cases, and there have been 3 deaths. Fatal in 1 in 3 humans. So when you get it, the odds are not good of you surviving this, right? And 27 animals have been sickened. So what has happened this year? Why is it so bad? I know they're doing some additional aerial spraying in several counties around the state. They've been limiting outdoor activity in some region of the state. So what's your thought on this?
What's going on with this? Well, it's a combination of different things. We have longer summers. We have wetter summers, more wet weather, more intense wet weather. So that really amps up the breeding of mosquitoes. And in our particular case in the Great Lakes Bay region, for about a good 30, 40 years, we've had a good, robust mosquito control system in place. In Bay, Saginaw, Midland, and Tuscola counties, they're all taxpayer supported, millage supported activities. And they work closely with public health agencies in those areas, and they work closely together. And they do, for our benefit, they do surveillance all year long. They do treatment, not necessarily all year long, but they do treatment for a good part of the year. So anybody in Bay City, you've seen the mosquito control trucks going around. You probably have seen mosquito control flights take place during the spring and even into the fall. So we're used to this here in the Great Lakes Bay region. Down south, in some of these southwest counties, they don't have that. It's not as robust. And you're seeing more and more wet weather. And like I said, more and more breeding grounds for mosquitoes. Warmer weather continuing longer. And it's just a perfect storm for these types of diseases to occur. In eastern equine encephalitis has been around since 1980 in the state of Michigan. So we do see cases every year. We see a few human cases, but not like this year. But we have seen a lot of wet weather, and you can attribute that, the influx of mosquitoes to that wet weather.
You talked a little bit about climate change. That's sort of a hot button phrase. I mean, do you think you're seeing some of that this could be something we'll continue to see?
Well, it's certainly on our radar, and a good example of this would be the mosquito that brings the Zika virus. And there's a couple of different vector types of mosquitoes that do that. Typically, a few years ago, you would see that only in Florida, the southern states, the Gulf states. But those mosquitoes have been reported all the way up into southern Illinois. And it's also been talked that it's just a short time before they come to Michigan in the Great Lakes area. Typically, those seasons don't last very long. I mean, down in Florida and the Gulf Lakes, you're going to have mosquitoes all year long. But those vector type of illnesses, that's the technical term for mosquitoes, those vector-borne illnesses are becoming more and more of concern, especially as the weather gets warmer each and every year. I mean, this is the hottest record summer that we've had. And we typically see more activity in things like this. Whereas before we had shorter summers and more sustained longer, colder winters. So they don't necessarily kill off the mosquitoes like they used to.
You know, back to the aerial spraying. I mean, in Great Lakes Bay, are we the only region of Michigan that collectively has a year-round spraying program? Is that how that works?
I wouldn't say a year-round spraying program,
Right.
but a year-round surveillance and treatment program. The work that our mosquito control agencies do, particularly in Bay County, that's where I'm from,
Right.
they do a phenomenal job. They're out there all year long making traps, collecting mosquitoes, doing surveillance. They do surveillance on birds. That's how we know that West Nile virus is an issue. We had a case of human West Nile virus last week, but we've known that we've had animal cases since July. Not unusual because we get animal cases every year. But they do that job with a decent staff, and it's taxpayer funded because we want to have that here in our area, and we want to have a good quality of life. As you get down to some of these southern counties, they don't have that. They may have some part-time folks at the health department doing some surveillance, but then they might contract out with some different companies to do mosquito control or mosquito abatement. So it's not as robust as it is here in the Great Lakes Bay region.
Well, our tax dollars at work there, right? And we
Yes.
approve those millages, we approve those taxes, and this is a perfect case that your money is well spent for that. I know I live in Saginaw County, and I'm grateful that we have it. There are some communities that are opting out, almost like opting out of vaccines, and one particular area was, I think, the Kalamazoo area, where they've seen an increase in animals, and I think they had a death in Kalamazoo. So.
The one thing I do want to note about
Yeah.
eastern equine encephalitis is 1 in 3 deaths, and then But a good number, a majority of the people that do get it and survive actually have some form of mild to severe brain damage as a result. So that's why we want people to take it seriously. It's not just a short-term illness like the flu or a mild cold. It's a very, very serious illness. It comes on very rapidly. It mimics a lot of the symptoms of meningitis, and that's how we're able usually to pinpoint it and diagnose it, because doctors will order a battery of tests to find out what it is. But it's very serious, and it comes on very quickly.
At the health department in Bay County, are you seeing more and more of your constituents, the residents, maybe calling, inquiring? Do you sense there's a concern, even though it's not so much in Bay County, Great Lakes Bay? Are people asking questions, or?
People are asking questions, but then once we reassure them about our surveillance efforts and the efforts that Bay County Mosquito Control has. And also, it's important to note too that mosquito control also works with the local high schools when there's football games going on, so they'll do some pregame spraying. And that's one of the reasons why you can go to enjoy a football game and not be chewed up by mosquitoes. So.
That's good. Got about a minute left. It is October 1st. It's been hot the last couple of days. It's raining. The mosquitoes are still out there.
Yes. So
we need to take some precautions. Are there some basic things that we probably should do, at least in the short term here, until we get a frost, right?
Absolutely. Until we get the first hard frost, which could come next week, could be a month from now. We don't exactly know. Just some basic prevention. If you're going out, especially between dusk and dawn, is to wear long sleeves, and long pants. Shoes, not necessarily sandals, and use mosquito repellent, approved mosquito repellent. There's a variety of different lists. If you go on the Bay County Health Department website, we've got some links to products that people can use. But just use precaution. You know, the same thing you would as if you're going in the deep woods.
Sure.
Do that.
And if you've got some standing water, and this time of year,
especially
with the water.
Standing water in your backyard, or if you got tires around your house, dump the water out.
Hey, thanks for coming in and kicking off the first show of our third season. And good information, and we appreciate you coming in. We'll have you on again.
All right, thank you.
Okay. And that's our show for tonight, but be sure to join us again next week for the follow-up. In the meantime, hit us up on social media or dial into our follow-up hotline to help fuel the conversation here on the show. We'll see you next Tuesday night at 8.